What's good, guys? So I want to talk about this article by That Park Place. Ubisoft value tanks. Market cap dropped 85% from 2021 to 2025. We're going to go ahead and get into this, kind of give some of my thoughts about what's in the article. Anyways, if you like this, please leave a like. It does greatly help out the channel, and consider subscribing. We're currently on the road to 2K. Anyways, with that said, let's go ahead and hop into this. Once a titan of the gaming industry, Ubisoft has experienced a dramatic and concerning decline in value over the past 4 years. From a market capitalization of 12.17 billion in January 2021, the company's value plummeted to a mere 1.78 billion by January 2025. This represents an alarming loss of approximately 85% of its market value, underscoring severe financial turmoil, strategic missteps that have left Assassin's Creed developers struggling to maintain a foothold in a highly competitive industry. In January 2021, Ubisoft stood strong with a market cap of 12.17 billion. This reflected a status as a powerhouse in the gaming world. However, by January 2024, the company's value had been cut by over 74%, dropping to 3.14 billion. Basically, that just says the majority of this drop has actually taken place over the last few years. Now, this here is kind of, we got their high in 2018 and their high in 2021. I think realistically, these two highs are not fair assessments of their overall market value. I would think probably more along the lines of this kind of line through. If you look at this low point that sort of happened in the middle between those two, that I would think if you averaged it out, I think of an evaluation when they were at the heights of COVID is probably not a fair evaluation. Any sort of entertainment that required you to be indoors sort of had an unfair advantage at that point. And granted, they probably took that unfair advantage and rode with it, and probably scaled their company at a time where they weren't really accurately reflecting what demand would look like, 3-4 years out, which to their credit, I can understand the growth, because I know that we think of stock price as merely just like a factor and everything, but that's literally everything to a company of this size. And even though it's irresponsible when you knew that the COVID growth that you had would not be there long term, if you're one of these mega publishers, you're not going to sell to your investors the concept of viewing growth in context. And so I'm sure they probably scaled at a point where it was irresponsible to do so. And we're going to kind of get into their hiring situation and their staffing situation, because that's probably the most underwater of everything about this company right now. The downward trajectory continued unabated into 2025, where the market cap further decreased by nearly 43% from the previous year, settling at 1.78 billion. The total reduction of 10.39 billion over 4 years highlights deep-rooted issues within the company's operation strategy. When we factor in the most recent reports, loans from March 2024 totaling 2.71 billion, likely higher now due to updated rates and additional borrowing not yet reflected in the valuation, Ubisoft's financial position seems to have worsened compared to 2024. The company's inability to sustain liquidity sufficient to cover its mounting debt is exacerbated by the impending release of Assassin's Creed Shadows in February, a game that has already garnered significant negative reception. If Shadows flops, it could cripple Ubisoft's ability to secure further loans to sustain operation through 2025 with its current valuation to debt ratio. No bank would be likely to extend additional credit without a solid assurance of repayment. Unless a miracle occurs, Shadows could deepen Ubisoft's financial woes and potentially push the company towards bankruptcy. Industry expert Joost van Drunen, I'll probably mispronounce that, founder of Superdata, has voiced a grim prognosis for Ubisoft, suggesting that the company is on the verge of privatization and dismantling in 2025. He points out that Ubisoft's share price has nosedived, making it an attractive target for takeover. Its valuable assets, particularly Rainbow Six and Assassin's Creed franchise, could be worth more separately than together, he said. The upcoming Assassin's Creed Shadow faces stiff competition from PlayStation's Ghosts of Yotei, and recent failures suggest a deeper organizational issue beyond the individual's game's performance. Ubisoft's strategic missteps have significantly contributed to its financial decline. Recent game releases such as Star Wars Outlaws have fallen short of market expectations, with pre-orders reportedly abysmal and sale figures remaining undisclosed, a red flag for financial instability. Star Wars Outlaws, I think, was really the oh crap moment. If we start to look at not just 2024 for Ubisoft, because a lot of people have detailed 2024 going back to Skull and Bones, then you have sort of the flop with Outlaws. We have the situation with X Defiant, which is kind of crazy. And all of that is true. 2024 was definitely their worst year. But if you start to look at even their past years, like when was the last time they had a really successful game? Was it Valhalla? Because I think we had Watch Dogs Legions. I'm not sure when exactly that came out. I think that was close to a launch title, but I know that didn't do well, so that kind of killed that franchise. Far Cry 6, I've seen didn't do particularly great, so it's really been a long time since Ubisoft has had a huge financial win coming out of any of their AAA franchises. And I think it really might be Valhalla. And if you look at Valhalla, it wasn't because Valhalla was exceptionally better than previous games. If anything, I would say it's probably worse than both Origins and Odyssey. The difference being is Origins and Odyssey didn't have the benefit of basically coming out during a pandemic. And even though I think there's some quality problems with Valhalla, it probably still did better simply because it had that unfair advantage. The decision to release Star Wars Outlaws on Steam shortly after launch, deviating from the exclusive Ubisoft Connect platform strategy used for successful titles like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, suggests a desperate attempt to salvage sales and improve liquidity. This move indicates the company lacks confidence in its own distribution channels, along with an inability to maintain strategic consistency. This is the oh crap button. Like, I think if you go back a few months to when we had sort of that tirade on LinkedIn from Ubisoft's monetization director, at that point they kind of hit the oh panic button, and I think a lot of the reason that it was coming specifically from the monetization director at Ubisoft is because when things got real, they threw out basically the entire monetization strategy that they had up until that point. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that when Shadows comes out, there won't be some of the microtransactions that we saw going back to titles like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, because those titles have already proven to be tolerated, and I think those will still be there. But you look at the idea that they stopped with this holding a cutout quest pre-order bonus. They stopped with a lot of the different versions they had. They stopped with their Ubisoft Connect release thing. They, basically said we're getting Star Wars Outlaws out on Steam as quickly as possible, and we plan to start releasing on Steam. I don't know if that's day and date with Shadows, but I know that it's going to be, very close to the actual release of the game. So you can see there is a level of panic when Outlaws didn't perform. I think they had banked on that title. And they probably were banking on that title because they really hadn't come to terms with a lot of the loss of quality that they've faced over the years within the publisher across their different teams. Financially, Ubisoft is grappling with mounting debt and declining revenue. As of its latest financial report, Ubisoft's non-IFRS net debt stands at $1.1 billion, and its IFRS net debt has risen to $1.4 billion. Now, I'll be honest, I don't know what IFRS stands for here. But I think it basically means they owe a lot of money, and the fact that their evaluation has dropped so significantly. And at this point, you could say that it had hit a low and come back up, but it's been at a low now for a while now. So it is kind of starting to seem like this current evaluation is their new normal going forward, which creates a huge problem because their debt was not accumulated under that evaluation, or at least the majority of it. Up sharply from $880.8 million the previous year, with cash reserves dwindling to $932 million. The company is struggling to generate sufficient revenue to offset its borrowing costs. Additionally, the estimated annual cost of $746.6 million for maintaining 18,666 strong workforce is substantial given the declined revenues and increasing debt burden. Now, I don't know if that number also constitutes after they close the X Defiant developer. That might still be on the books because I don't think they've, finished that closure as of yet. So some of that will be coming off. How big that team is, I don't know. But when you're talking about a company that's worth under $2 billion, having an 18,000, close to 19,000 strong workforce, to put that into perspective. Now, Xbox it's hard to gauge what their actual evaluation is, largely because their financials are wrapped up in Microsoft. Also, Game Pass kind of obfuscates a lot of their financials as to what their actual value is. But we do have to remember at the end of the day, they are a platform holder, which is different than just being a publisher, even if that is by far the weakest platform out there. But when we look at just what they've acquired, when they got Activision Blizzard, I believe that deal was like around $75 billion. I could be off on that math. Granted, when they absorbed Bethesda, I don't believe that was a publicly traded company at the time, but the agreed upon evaluation there was $7 billion, which I don't think is really super outrageous given what we know about the IPs that they have. So you're talking about, let's say conservatively, because that's not including any of the studios that they owned, any of the individual studios that they were absorbing going up to those acquisitions. Let's just include just those publishers because I feel like that's a conservative, very conservative estimate of what Xbox's valuation should be. That's still well over 80 billion. And Microsoft, last I looked, has a workforce roughly of about 20,000. So kind of put those two evaluation to workforce ratios into context. Ubisoft, 1.8 billion, 18,666 workforce. Xbox, 80 billion plus 20,000 strong workforce. Clearly, the Ubisoft is overstaffed to an irresponsible level. Even when they were at their highest evaluation, they were significantly overstaffed. And I don't see the one thing is I was thinking about kind of doing a video where I talked about what I think the layoff situation would look like in 2025. Definitely kind of a darker video, but I kind of just wanted to get it out there as a prognosis for where I thought things are going. I don't know if I'm going to do that video. I do think there are going to be layoffs across the industry yet again. There's various reasons for that. I don't think Xbox post-acquisitions has really found the sweet spot given how much they took on. I think Sony has had a lot of flops and they're not really ready to start releasing strong titles that are going to financially rebolster them, and we'll wait to see if that happens. But to pretty much truncate that video, I don't see how there's going to have to be massive layoffs at Ubisoft. I'm talking layoffs to a degree that we have never seen before in this industry. Like, I will say this right now, Ubisoft could lay off just themselves the entirety of all the layoffs that we had in 2024, perhaps more. Because there is no way, given where they're at financially, that they can sustain this. The level of debt that they're already taking on is staggering, to say the least. And to think that they can continue to operate anywhere close to this size, given where they are financially right now, is not tenable, to say the least. Van Drunen criticizes Ubisoft's outdated development approach, which fails to engage players and builds a strong community. That's a necessity in the modern gaming landscape. The shutdown of X Defiant is not merely a failed launch, but a symptom of a broader problem: Ubisoft's inability to adapt its distribution and develop strategies to contemporary demands. Ubisoft is not, they're a company that chases trends. If you look at X Defiant, they were kind of chasing COD, which I think is something that we learned during the 7th generation is probably not a great idea. If you look at their single player titles, they basically re-released the same game with another skin, with a different skin. And I mean, there's when you're talking about fostering communities, you have to have products that people love. And because they're so, I don't want to say redundant, but like they're so reductive in how their production is that there's not really any significant love for their titles outside of, oh yeah, I like that one, you know. There's love for their franchises, but a lot of that love is placed on titles that are well in the rear view at this point. Moreover, the costly development of Skull and Bones, which has reportedly consumed between 650 and 850 million over a decade, highlights inefficiencies in resource allocation and project management. This project, alongside the cancellation of multiplayer games like X Defiant, has drained financial reserves without delivering expected returns. I think we kind of just assumed that they knew that Skull and Bones was going to be a failure, and so the finances of that particular game don't matter, but that game drained them of so much, and them getting locked into a contract with the government that forced them to produce the game meant that that was such a terrible move, because they did not have the ability to get out from under a bad idea, basically. Cultural and ideological overreach has also played a role in Ubisoft's downfall. The company's intense focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives has alienated a portion of its core fan base. Overindulgence in DEI without balancing other strategic priorities has led to disenchantment among loyal customers, investors, contributing to the erosion of Ubisoft's market confidence. I don't like using the term diversity, equity, inclusion. It gives an era, it gives an air of altruism to it. And really, the reasons for doing it are far more self-serving. They're not for helping, you know, marginalized groups of people. I prefer the term progressive intersectional tokenism. If you want to go with an acronym, the acronym is PIT, which I think far more describes what it's doing to the industry currently. It is a money pit. I will say, though, that even without diversity, equity, inclusion, the problems that come with all of this progressive development within there is that it comes with a lot of other losses in quality. I really don't have any problem with representation to a certain degree. I think it doesn't make sense in some situations, Assassin's Creed Shadows being one of those situations. But if the underlying fundamentals of the game are fine, if the writing is good, if you know the characters are designed well, if everything is done up to the standards that it needs to be done, really the message isn't the problem in and of itself. Now, oftentimes the message can be the problem because gaming is a form of escapism, and whenever you pull somebody out of that escapism to kind of dump your real world nonsense onto them when they are literally trying to get away from that is maybe not a great idea, whether you be whatever side of the spectrum you be on. It's as equally bad for cultural progressivism to thrust itself upon the consumer as it would be for right-wing Christian conservatism to thrust itself upon the viewer. Escapism is about removing yourself from the real world dynamics of politics, not injecting them into the product, because it's an entertainment product and its fundamental design is to entertain first and foremost. And interjecting on either side of that just dilutes from the prime objective of the game. Workforce challenges further complicates Ubisoft's financial struggles. The company has been forced to hire external contractors due to overstaffed and inexperienced internal workforce. And that's just crazy, because you have all this hiring. You're hiring these people that present a problem to you because of the products that they're producing. And that then forces you to outsource because you're paying people to not produce the product that you're paying them to produce. This reliance on external talent not only inflates production costs, but also leads to inefficiencies, as many of these contractors lack the necessary experience to contribute effectively to game development. This imbalance has resulted in poorly executed gameplay, increasing production costs, further straining Ubisoft's already precarious financial situation. Adding to these multifaceted challenges, it is a looming threat of bankruptcy. And that's the thing. We were talking about the Tencent acquisition of them earlier on after they delayed Assassin's Creed Shadows. I think if you're Tencent at this point, you look at it as, why should I pay a premium to acquire all of Ubisoft, which at this point is a troubled production Then once you pay that premium, you're forced to go in there and hack out the parts that you can't make profitable, which is going to come with a fair amount of bad PR for Tencent from the industry, a company that already has its fair share of bad PR. So why do all that? Why come in and rescue them just to deal with the troubled mess that they have across the board when you can just wait for them to go under and just buy the pieces of them that you actually want? And I think if you're any company right now with the ability to buy them, you're kind of looking at them like, why should I bail you out? And to be honest, that's reasonable given where they are financially. According to a recent exclusive story by That Part Place writer Francesco Solbach, Ubisoft's financial woes are so severe that bankruptcy in 2025 appears imminent if drastic changes are not implemented. The company's escalating debt, declining cash reserves, and poor stock performance has significantly weakened its financial standing. Analysis estimate Ubisoft's credit rating has plummeted to CCC level, a level that indicates imminent bankruptcy unless immediate positive changes occur. That's probably the biggest thing. Not only is their debt an issue, their financials have gone so awry that they can't even get more loans. They're at a point where the reason that bankruptcy is imminent more than anything else is they can't even get the capital to dig themselves out of this situation at this point because they've devalued their rating so much. The potential privatization and dismantling of Ubisoft have attracted interest in major players like Tencent. However, Tencent buyout may not be the lifeline Ubisoft desperately needs. Instead of acquiring Ubisoft's corporate structure, Tencent might find more value in purchasing its intellectual properties through a bankruptcy auction, leaving Ubisoft to declare bankruptcy without a sustainable path forward. This scenario would mark a tragic end for a company that once stood as the pinnacle of the gaming industry, now reduced to battling insurmountable financial organizational challenges. I think that is really where the rubber meets the road for gaming in 2025. A lot of what was said is that 2024 was the year the bottom fell out of the gaming industry, at least the Western gaming industry. We like to spread this out while the East is doing fine, while indies are doing well, while other sections of the gaming industry who haven't had the quality concerns that the West has had, we like to spread it to them while they're still doing fine. But here's the thing that I will say. I think Concord was a shock to the system for a lot of Western publishers. The idea that you could spend close to $500 million. I mean, we don't know the actual financials. I know the $400 billion has been reported out there. We don't know the acquisition cost because now the studio's been closed. So you have to add that into whatever the cost of development was on that game. We don't know if it was actually $500 million, but I would say it's definitely north of 300 million, conservatively guessing at this point. But the idea that you could drop that amount of money and have nothing to show for it, like not even a game to show for it, it's just literally all red ink on your tax returns. That definitely was a shock to the system. Ubisoft going under is beyond a shock to the system. Ubisoft going under would create such a panic across the West that I don't really even know what that would look like, because the idea is a lot of these games that were started years ago that are now troubled products, even some that are probably going to be coming out this year, those are so far in development that you can't really change them. But what do you do when everything that you've done for the past 3 years is suddenly you realize is a threat to your entire existence? Now, I'm not saying that some of these games that come out this year will threaten their prospective publishers. The financials of all the different publishers are very different from Ubisoft. Ubisoft was very ingrained in just a few franchises that eroded over time. Like if you look at an EA, they have all of the sports titles to garner losses in other projects. But I think if you actually see one of these mega publishers go under, we're going to see ripples throughout this industry that we have never seen. And I think this is probably going to be, unfortunately, the biggest layoff year in the gaming industry that we have ever seen, by orders of magnitude. I think we keep on looking at 2022 to 2023 to 2024 and just assuming that, okay, we're finally reaching the top of that bell curve. I don't think we have, because the idea of a whole publisher going under that employs 18 or close to 19,000 employees. I'm not saying that there isn't a path forward after that, but it's not with 19,000 employees, not with anything close to that. So you could see a situation where Ubisoft alone, just in overall layoffs, Ubisoft alone could dwarf the entire layoffs of last year within the industry. And that's a staggering, sobering prospect that I don't think we have seen yet happen within the triple Western A gaming space. Anyways, guys, that's going to do it for this one. Hope you enjoyed it, and we will catch you on the next one. Until then, guys, get awesome.